Hey guys, it's Tom Box, and for today's video, we're doing rulings on Kashtira. They're making their debut in Darkwing Blast, but they're probably not going to make a big scene until Photon Hypernova. But we're going to cover the ground rules in terms of the rulings about these cards, just so that you're not as confused in the future. So yeah, this is for future Tom or future you that's going to be looking back at this. Now, some players are already pretty confused about how these rules work, and they're using the improper ways of handling some of these card effects, which result in nothing. So, you know what, guys? We're going to cover this ruling video like any of our past ones. We're going to do a ruling quiz, break it down so we can understand the mindset of players, things that they're going to say, things that they're going to ask, so that you can respond properly if it does come up in your situation. So from Kashtira versus negation, Kashtira versus triggers, and Kashtira versus, I guess, placement on the field, we're going to cover 3 questions here, and hopefully I'll answer most of your issues. But before we get started with today's ruling quiz, I would like to talk about today's video sponsor, Bloodlines, Heroes of Lithis. This game has one of the most unique game mechanics I've ever seen. If you haven't dived into the fantasy world of Bloodlines, now is the time, because they got their biggest update ever with a new mind-blowing hybrid system. Download now and try it for free and receive a special starter pack. In Bloodline, they took their own unique spin on gacha gameplay. Create your own unique champions by combining the bloodlines of your favorite races like demons, demigods, orcs, elves, and many more. Have your champions marry each other using their unique marriage system, and they will have children, which creates hybrid offsprings that inherit talents from both parents. You can create over 800 new hybrids of any 2 bloodlines. The Halloween event is starting on October 27th, and with that, a brand new lineage of cool vampires called the Accursed will be coming into the game. Cursed with the insatiable thirst for blood, allowing them to nuke the enemy and leech life in battle. Participate in the Halloween event starting October 27th, and you can get an Accursed champion free on the 7th day. With awesome graphics, you can raise your heirs with your favorite waifu, or waifus, or even husbandos, as you can change the gender of your companion freely. The more intimate you are with your companion, the stronger your offspring, just like real life. You can download and try out the game for free. Use my link in the description or scan the QR code shown on screen. You can get a special starter pack using my link. You'll get about 10 energy potions, 100,000 gold, and 100 diamonds. And thank you, Bloodlines, Heroes of Lithis, for sponsoring this video. Alright, question number 1. Kashtira Shangri-Ira versus Negate effect. So, in this scenario, I control a Kashtira Shangri-Ira, and I've resolved the effect 5 times because my opponent is a buffoon and let me basically lock out every single monster zone they have. So, you know what? Okay. Anyways, my opponent activates Infinite Impermanence during their draw phase. The phase doesn't really matter here. And negates the effect of Shangri-Ira and then attempts to summon a monster. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold it right there. Stop it. You can't do that. Your zones are still locked out. He or she or they go, well, I negate your effects, so it turns off. Well, I argue like, well, you know what? Let's just call a judge. So we call a judge, and who do you think the judge will side with? Now you have 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, that was the wrong finger. And the answer is you are still locked out. So yeah, it sucks that your zones are still locked out, and it's locked out because the effects of Shangri-Ira has already resolved, and Shangri-Ira is not a card with a continuous effect. This means that it is not like Ojama King. So to kind of bring 3 things into examples that are likely going to be used as comparison, Ojama King. Ojama King is different. Ojama King is a continuous effect, so if you negate Ojama King's continuous effect cannot continue to apply because it would be negated. This one instead activates and resolves, and because it resolved, it applied already, and once it's applying to the game state, the only thing that it is checking for is whether or not the Shangri-Ira that activated it, or rather the one that allowed this effect to resolve, is still face up. It doesn't care whether or not the card itself is actually negated. So if you use your imperms, your Dark Ruler No Mores, your droplets, whatever that you're using, that will not re-enable your zones. You're going to have to meet the condition of removing it off of the field or making sure that it is no longer face up. And to kind of give you another direct example where this has a precedent of is X-Code Talker, which literally carries, I think, the exact same wording when it comes to this. X-Code Talker also locks out a zone, and it basically, while this card remains face up on the field, those zones cannot be used. So in that particular case, even if you skill drain, well, the thing is, this is a trigger effect that has already applied when it's link summoned, and so if you skill drain, your zones are still basically locked out. All right, because it's applied already. And if that doesn't make sense to you, I'll take it one step back even further, because like, oh, but I negated it, it should be gone. Think about it this way. I have a Blackwing Gale, and you have a Stardust Dragon. I activated Blackwing Gale's effect and have your Stardust Dragon. Then all of a sudden, you decide to, perhaps later on in the turn, activate Skill Drain. You negate my Gale now. Does your Stardust Dragon boost back up to 25? It does not, because my Blackwing Gale has already applied. Even if I leave the field, it doesn't change the fact that your Stardust is going to be at half of its original attack. So TLDR, use Book of Moon, use Book of Eclipse, use something to compulse it off the field, use Evenly Match to clear it off the board, then you can reopen your zones. Question number 2, Kashtira monster trigger effects. So, in this case, we're going to be using Fenrir, for example. So my opponent decides to normal summon out their Aluber and activates its effect to search. I decide to chain my Kashtira preparation to summon out my Fenrir that has been banished. The chain resolves, I summon out my Fenrir, they decide to add their branded fusion to hand, and after the chain resolves, I say, hey, hold on a second, I'm going to activate Fenrir's effect because a monster effect has activated. And my opponent says, hey, you can't do that. And then I respond like, hey, you said that your Aluber activated and resolved, thus allowing Fenrir's trigger to go off because you activated a monster effect. And it remembers in the previous chain, because I can't chain directly to it. This is a trigger effect. It's a spell speed 1. So then after this argument, they call a judge. All right, we call a judge. And who do you think the judge will side with? You guys have 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the judge will probably side with the opponent. First of all, I would like to apologize for my previous video statement in the Sprite video where I talked about you can actually revive the Fenrir. Yes, you can revive the Fenrir with the double cross, but you will not likely get the trigger effect if you're chaining onto an existing monster effect, and if you're up higher in the chain link, you're not going to be able to trigger that Fenrir, so revive it earlier, I guess. But in any case, for this one is a matter of trigger effects being in the correct location. Kashtira, Unicorn, Fenrir, and Ogre, all of these monsters have a trigger effect, and there's 2 different triggers on that same effect. One is to declare an attack to meet the trigger, and the second one is that your opponent has to activate a monster effect. In this particular case, Fenrir was not on the field during the activation of Aluber. It got summoned out during the chain, but it wasn't there to basically witness the activation of Aluber, therefore it doesn't exactly meet its triggering condition. Although in the previous chain it does acknowledge a monster effect has activated, but the Fenrir was actually not on the field at the time. Cards that trigger in areas of public knowledge, such as being on the field or in the graveyard, they basically need to be in the correct area already at the beginning of the activation to meet those sort of activation conditions for their trigger. All right, does that make sense? And as for areas of private knowledge, such as the hand, that's a little bit different. They can trigger immediately when they're added to hand, even if they're added as a later part of the chain. They will be able to witness the previous chain as something has already happened, and they basically kind of get a bypass in terms of this. I think this is just to prevent the confusion of people having multiple copies of the same card that has that same trigger, and because you can't confirm your opponent's hand because it's private knowledge. So as a general rule of thumb, even if they have like 0 cards in hand, they add 1 freshly to the hand, anything that's in the private knowledge area, they will have a bypass to be able to activate regardless of whether or not it has witnessed the trigger condition. And if you want a private knowledge example, it's pretty easy. Just look at Personal Spoofing and Altergeist Multi-Faker. They can just freshly activate a Personal Spoofing and add a Multi-Faker, and then the Multi-Faker will be able to trigger and summon itself out, as long as that Personal Spoofing wasn't already face up. Question number 3, a 2-part question. Let's see if you can get both of these parts right. Kashtira trap card, namely Preparation. In this scenario, there's a Fenrir on the field and the opponent decides to activate Infinite Impermanence in the draw phase immediately to turn off the Fenrir. Okay, however, chaining to the Infinite Impermanence, there is a Kashtira Preparation in hopes to look at your opponent's hand and banish 1 card. Since I already control the Fenrir, alright, so after the chain resolves, I'm going to activate Preparations, and I'm going to look at your hand and I'm going to banish 1 card. You say you can't. Who is correct on this one? This is question part 1. So you have 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This one's pretty easy. This one you just have to read the card. Now, if your opponent activates a trap card or effect, you control a Kashtira monster, and this card is already face up in your spell and trap zone, look at your opponent's hand, and if you do, banish 1 card face down. Because during the activation of Infinite Impermanence, my Preparation was not face up at the time. Therefore, the preparation will not be able to look at the opponent's hand and will rip a card out of there and banish it. Yeah, it's pretty simple. Now, I want to explain one thing that might be a bit more important, just in case like people rule this one incorrectly. Now, if say they do resolve the card and the opponent does look at your hand and banish one, later on they call a judge, they repair the game state, because it is a repairable game state. This is not a PE major of any kind. I think this is still PE minor based off of what I'm reading in terms of like the policy document. It states here within the infraction that if a duelist damages the game state due to an illegal action, sure, the game state can be rewound to the point of that illegal action, which was the effect of using the effect of the Kashtira preparation, and even if the opponent may gain advantage from information that was previously private knowledge. So yeah, this is still considered as a repairable game state, so unless it's an upgraded offense, likely what's going to happen is that this is going to be treated as a PE minor. At least personally, I would judge it as a PE minor. Yes, the opponent has the one of the most unfair advantage, which is they know your entire hand, which makes it very difficult to play. So this is something that I would recommend everyone to know, even though it was like such a basic ruling. I would recommend everyone to kind of grill this into their head so that they don't get put into a disadvantage position like that, and they're likely gonna have to play through that level of disadvantage, and that's just gonna be pretty rough. All right. For part 2, we're gonna reverse the scenario now. There's a Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon on the field, and there is a Kashtira preparation that is also already face up, but there are no Kashtira monster. You decide to activate Infinite Impermanence to turn off that Flare Metal Dragon. However, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna chain to your Imperm, and I'm going to summon out my Fenrir right onto the field. Okay. And then, of course, Chain Link 2, my Fenrir gets summoned. Chain Link 1, your Imperm goes off and negates the effect of my Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon. And so what happens after that is like, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to activate Kashtira preparation to look at your hand and rip one card out. You say, you can't do that. Your Fenrir wasn't on the field at the time of the activation of my card. So when you call a judge over this time, what is the judge going to say? Do you get to activate the Kashtira preparation to look at your opponent's hand and rip one out? Or you don't? You guys have 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So in this case, yeah, I do get to look at your hand and rip a card out, because the conditions are pretty clear here that your opponent has to activate a trap card or effect. So yeah, that has been met in the condition. I control a Kashtira monster by the time this card activates. Yeah, because I don't need a Kashtira monster on the field at the time of your activation. That's not the condition of this card. It just says I have to control a Kashtira monster, and if this card is already face up. And in this case, this card was already face up, and by the time I can activate this card, there is a Kashtira monster on the field. So yeah, it does meet the condition. Therefore, I get to look at your hand and rip one out. So did you guys get all of these questions right? Well, if you guys did, you know, pat yourselves on the back, because this is not the most easy thing, and hopefully you guys remember the one in the third question, just so that you guys don't get screwed over by revealing your entire hand accidentally and basically just ruining your entire game, because likely you're gonna have to play through that game, unfortunately. So, you know, that's still a repairable game state. Anyways, that's all I got for this video, guys. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two about, well, trigger effects, resolved effects, and yeah, not screwing yourself over. That's all I got for this one. If you guys enjoyed this video, smash that thumbs up button. If you guys want to see more stuff from MST.TV, hit subscribe, ding that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next one.